Hey guys, back with part 3 of how to make a knife from a file. So in this one, we're going to give it a handle and we're going to finish it up. I'll go ahead and glue the handle together now. I'm using a wood glue called Titebond 2 to glue the two halves together, but you could use a two-part epoxy if you want. Before I glued it up, by the way, I drove a brass pin through the tang hole just to make sure that everything fits right. Here it is, clamped up for an hour or so, then left to cure for another 24 hours. In the Japanese tradition, handles are made to be removable, as I've done here, but there's no law that says you have to do it this way. You could have just epoxied the whole schmear together in one throw. Next, with the blade removed, I'll shape the handle. Again, this could be done after the blade's epoxied and pinned, but if you do it separately, you'll feel secure that you won't mess up your blade. So I'll clamp the handle in a vise and begin shaping it with a carpenter's rasp. In real life, I do all this sort of thing with a belt grinder, but the point of this video is to show you how to do it with the simplest possible tools. The rasp has finer and rougher teeth, so I'll do the heavy stock removal with the big teeth, then go to the finer surface for the final shaping. I'm doing a super simple handle with no particularly interesting profiling, but you can shape it any way that's comfortable to your hand and to your eye. Now I'll use a sanding block, just like I did with the blade. In this case, I'll be using wood sandpaper, and I'll start with a much heavier grit than I used on the steel. After that, I'll move on to 220. I don't use a sanding block on the final step, and this will assure a nice smooth finish with no gouges. Here's a little trick that's as old as woodworking. This particular wood's very chippy, so I ended up with some voids that I want to fill. What I'll do is get a little sawdust, mix it with some glue, and just press it into those voids. This is how fine woodworkers did it before they could go down to Home Depot and buy wood filling putty. Now I'll sand off the extra. Smooth as a baby's ass. Next, I'll secure the cross pin using a two-part epoxy to hold it in place. After it's secured, I'll file down the ends and then sand them a little so they make a nice smooth transition to the wood. Now we move to finishing. This is an extremely heavily figured wood. In its natural state, it looks like garbage, but once you add finish, the figure will just pop right out. There are a million different kinds of finishes. I always like to test different finishes on a particular piece of wood that I'm going to be using before I make a final decision on what to use. Every wood is different, and they all respond differently to different finishes. There are oil finishes, shellacs, lacquers, you name it, and they all look better on some things than others. For heavily figured woods, glossy built-up finishes like lacquers tend to bring out the figure more than oil finishes like tung oil, which make the figure a little muddy looking. In this case, I'll use a water-based urethane, which doesn't have noxious fumes and is pretty hassle-free to use. I don't find water-based to give me the best results, but it has a lot of advantages from a safety and convenience standpoint. If I were going for the highest quality finish, I'd probably go with something else, but for this knife, it'll be durable and plenty attractive. Once I've laid on several coats, I'll sand it. Same idea as everything I've done before. But in this case, I'll go up to about 1,000 grit. Easy does it because you don't want to cut through the finish. Note, in this case, I'll use water to lubricate the sandpaper. Sandpaper forms little lumps when you sand wood finishes. These little lumps are called corning, and water helps keep them from building up quite so fast. You want to sand just enough to remove all the high spots, which reveal themselves in this mottled look. Get the whole thing to one even tone, like so. And here's the final result. Next, I'll hone the blade on my Easy Lap diamond hone. And there. That's sharp. Well, that's it, guys. Hope you learned something. As we go forward, I'm going to be making a series of videos that are going to address increasingly more complex and interesting parts of knife making. This one was starting from ground zero, and we're going to kind of slowly climb the ladder and accumulate new skills so that eventually you'll know darn near everything you need to know to be a skilled knife maker. Well, that about wraps this project up. I hope you learned some good stuff here. I'll be following this video up with some more projects. If there's any particular kind of knife you'd like to learn how to make, let me know and I'll see if I can do a video for you.